Listen.
I've been hearing a lot lately about men don't talk, but in my experience, men do talk, just people aren't listening. So it's going to be me and a group of blokes discussing our struggles and victories through life. Warning, there may be some bad language, so apologies to all the mums, especially my own. Let's get going.
Listen.
It's the Black Country Blokes, doing the fact about everything that is mental health, disability, and life in general. Here with me, Kev Dillon, and my partner in crime, as always, Lee Cadman. And we're joined by a very good friend of mine. Now, she's that good of a friend, I've got her name wrong for 2 years. I've really got along with this woman. I look forward to seeing her most days at the latest classes, and I've been calling her Sarah. And what is your name?
My name is Sayra.
Sayra?
Yeah.
Very close. In Black Country, Sarah and Sayra are bloody close.
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to all to meeting Sayra.
Sayra.
Sayra. My mate. That's
He gets my name wrong all the time, so don't worry about it. Many know me 25 years now.
well, Osama's boxed me for over 10 years, and he's pronounced Osama. So, but,
Is it really?
Yeah.
So everyone's been calling him the wrong name.
Osama, yeah, and his name's
Okay.
Osama. But
He's too polite to correct
Well,
anyone as well.
same problem. But once again, I've invested in his name, and I say anyone who knows him before he got famous will know him as Osama.
Okay.
But anyway, I regress. Our gratitude list. I always like to believe we should always start life with gratitude. So I'm very grateful. ITV come down here last week, and it's going to be on ITV Central tomorrow. Thanks to Dudley, CVS, and Dudley Health Hub coming on to talk about the work that we do with dads. And one of the questions is there support out there for dads? And I openly said, no, there is no help out there for dads. That's what we do, the dad groups here. So
there is help. You're helping.
but not from the NHS, not through other things. We have to find our own way of helping one another. And sometimes if the help isn't there, we have got to be the help. What are you grateful for?
Well, as you know, we've just had some time off the podcast, which has been nice to have a break. But I also got the opportunity to go abroad, just me and my wife. And I'm grateful for that. It was great getting off the plane in Alicante and feeling that heat on your back. It's a different heat, and it was, it was really enjoyable. But also to my mum and Mandy, the PA, who were at home looking after my little one and the two eldest. And it gave us peace of mind that there were people there who knew Calla and could look after her the way she deserves. So yeah, I'm grateful for that. Grateful we had that opportunity.
And what are you grateful for?
So I've been thinking about this a lot, and I came ready with a whole list of things to share, but I'm just going to stick with one, and I hope you're ready, Kev, because I want to say that I'm grateful for you.
Oh, bloody hell. It's
Actually.
okay.
No, but I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and how oftentimes when I am here in the country, which, as you know, is not so often, you are the person that I see with the most regularity. And you've always been so kind and welcoming and open-hearted, that it's really just meant the world to me.
Thank you.
We talk a lot when I come in for the boxing, which I also really, really enjoy. I think after a year and a half of coming here, I'm probably not a better boxer, but my life is richer for having you in it.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, that's what I wanted to get you on for ages, because
What, to big you up?
Yeah.
To make you feel
Someone's got
better.
But I've enjoyed finding out so much about you and like the work that you do. And like when we'll get into what you do in a minute. But like I remember one of my favourite conversations while we're doing the pads, funny enough, and you're on about art, and there's that picture of the starving child and the vulture above it. And that's always stuck with me. And we were saying how on these documentaries or on these, they're going, well, like on animal things, well, we can't save the penguins, say, or we can't. And you're going, but we're not on a Discovery Channel. We can save people when we go to these places. Even if you take the picture of the vulture above the child, then kick the bird off and feed the child. We can prevent it. And that conversation's always stuck in my mind.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you. That's lovely. And it's always been like, this place has always been a space for me to be able to have those conversations with you, and to share like the achievements and the milestones and the successes like in work and life, but also to work through the challenges and the agonies that work sometimes brings with it. And that was, definitely one of those moments, kind of talking through the like the morality of the work that is out there and within the arts as well. So yeah, thank you for saying that.
So, explain.
Who am I?
Who are you?
Not Sarah.
Yeah. There's one big I'm not, and that's Sarah.
That's true. Yeah. So my name is still Sayra and not Sarah. I am a peace and conflict researcher. So currently I work as an academic researcher. So I work at a university where, I do peace and conflict research, and I focus my research predominantly around peace building, though I work on civil war as well. And my work has been concentrated firstly in West Africa. I did my PhD research in Sierra Leone, where I worked with ex-combatants and their kinds of justice experiences and needs after the civil war there. And now I work on a bigger project where I do my research about lived experiences of ongoing, successive, and multiple civil wars in South Sudan. So I work with conflict-affected communities from South Sudan, and most recently, I just came back from I've recently come back from 2 months of field research in Kenya, where I did a lot of my work in the refugee camp in Turkana, Kakuma refugee camp.
Because like a refugee camp, like people hear about, the refugees coming over and they're coming over and did. What's the camps like?
Terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's no real sugarcoating it. People live in conditions of complete depravity. But having said that, they also still always insist on creating a life in dignity for themselves there. And if you are open to seeing it, you will see so much community and love and care and gratitude existing in those places also. But it is literally a life in between. And for many people, like that refugee camp has existed since 1993, right? And there are many people who have been there since 1993. It might have actually been 1992, but
30 years.
Yeah, there are people who have lived most of their lives there. There are people who have been born in the camp and have never known anything else. And it is in many ways a situation of constant deprivation and dependence on the goodwill and the tolerance of international organizations and governments. And people have such a desire to better their situation, to seek education, to seek opportunity, but there just isn't enough of that.
There's goodness. There's goodness everywhere, isn't there? Yeah. And I imagine those kind of places, it must be so fun to bring up your child, or to be sick in any way, to be disabled or to be learning impaired, somewhere like that. It must be just hell, hadn't it?
It's hugely challenging. Yeah. I mean, it's as an experience, it was certainly a moment to be reminded of how much we have to be grateful for and how much privilege we have that we don't even realize. But the truth is also that hope does spring eternal, and life finds a way. People self-mobilize to form community clinics. People build their own churches. People build little communities within bigger communities. People still get married and have weddings. People still go to church on Sundays. They still watch the basketball games when their national team is playing. And most of all, people still laugh. People still find things to bring joy into their lives. And that was probably that was probably the most important and meaningful thing of that experience for me, like being able to connect with the people I was working with in ways that we could laugh together, and to see that, yeah, you know, like that is there. There's no, that will insist on always being there.
Well, we once again one of our conversations, and as you say, hope shines through, and it's whether it's having a song around the fire, or telling a story, or drawing, or painting, or whatever it is. In every horror story, there is that beauty, isn't there? And just thinking, well, we can't take photos now, so I'll draw you something in the mud, or I'm gonna sing you something. Like love is universal, isn't it? You haven't got to speak the same language as someone to not understand a smile, or you can see when someone's kind in their face, can't you? Or you can boost one's morale by just doing something kind and wonderful.
Absolutely. And this is also a huge part of what has inspired my particular commitment to an interest in like looking at what artistic practices mean for people who have lived through conflict and displacement experiences. Because like the truth is, and I really see this, that art is the highest form of hope.
Yeah.
Right. And it's multivocal and universal in many ways, right? I don't have to speak the same language as you to be able to appreciate like some kind of artistic practice together with you, whether it's listening to music, dancing, like a painting, you know, that communicates a really powerful message. And yeah, these are ways in which people find connection, you know, and connection is everything, right? And no matter where you go, people are finding and protecting and like cherishing connection, as we all are, right? Like that's not unique to those communities or my work in particular. Like each and every one of us, you know, like this place, the boxing club, is a space of community for me. We can't help ourselves, right?
But as you say, we all want to connect with someone or something, don't we? Whether that's we connect with bad things by circumstance, or we choose to connect with good people. And unfortunately, like in some of these refugee camps, they've been thrown into there by terrible, terrible circumstance. And then when they can find like-minded souls to once again connect with, it must give you a sense of hope. It must make you feel like it's not all bad. This is terrible, but yet in all this terribleness, you found something beautiful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, you know, for myself and for anybody who does research, is a researcher, or aspires to be a researcher, like there's a really important lesson in that, which is there is so much more and so much more complexity always than what we are primed to be focused on, right? Like I go into that particular context specifically as a conflict researcher, right? My focus is on understanding lived experiences of war and the dynamics and transformations of civil war over time. Like my focus is on war when I'm in the refugee camp. And it becomes so easy to only see that, right? When you're primed to look for something, your cognitive bias will mean that is all that you see. And it's so important in life in general, but in research in particular, to not be so myopic and to be open to the complexity that exists. And, you know, like as a war researcher in that particular instance, to see spaces of love and care, and to create space for that in my work and in my life.
I suppose that stops you drowning in that as well, in terms of, I can imagine speaking to people who've been in war constantly is going to affect you.
Yeah.
And the way it is. So being able to see not the good in war is probably the wrong word, but the good in people, it's going to help you get
absolutely
over.
And I think it makes that experience of doing research with people hopefully also more positive and meaningful for the people that I'm working with, that I'm not sitting there and only interested in the bad things that have happened in life for you, that if you want to share and talk about like the positive spaces and what dignity means for you, like in whatever conditions you're in, that there is space for that as well. That I'm not going to sit there and be like, okay, yeah, that's fine, whatever, but back to, you know, like these terrible events. And yeah, so it makes the experience much more positive for me and my mental health, and hopefully I think also a much more meaningful encounter for the people that I work with.
And I can imagine for their mental health, because no doubt they live in that war all the time, so actually having those moments and conversations where they're breaking away from that and not necessarily talking about that is good for people who've experienced war.
And there's a story behind every soldier, isn't there?
Yeah.
And they're not necessarily there by choice. They've been thrown into circumstances that, and it's very easy to be judgmental. Well, I would never do that, and you're thinking in the right amount of circumstance, good circumstance, bad circumstance, it's amazing what you will find yourself doing to survive, isn't it? Or to ensure the survival of your family.
Yeah. None of us is ever only one thing,
No.
right? And I think like this is something that was front and center in especially my PhD research, because that was all about unpacking the complexity of experiences held by ex-combatants who would conventionally just be labeled and cast as perpetrators in the context of war, and unpacking that and complicating that in ways that I think are generative. And I think there's a really great quote, and don't worry, I have several that I actually used in my PhD thesis. This poet named Walt Whitman, he has a poem called Song of Myself, and on the topic of complexity and contradictions, he writes, I am large, I contain multitudes. And yeah, that's very moving.
Well, there is no just goodies and baddies, is there? And that's how I think with the media, it's, oh, well, these are the goodies, these are the baddies. And at the end of the day, it's the people who are caught in the middle. They're the real victims of war, aren't they?
Yeah.
The people who they went to the shops to buy some milk and their world changed forever, or the children went to school and never come home. And
I think with especially I think Sierra Leone, a lot of the children are recruited young into the I don't think it's an army, it's called, is it? But they're recruited young and made to do things, or brainwashed to do things that are absolutely you wouldn't dream of kind of doing. And I can imagine maybe when they're getting older and realising what they've been through, the stresses and strains that must put on themselves be unreal.
And is it fair to, to hold somebody accountable for being a participant in war when they were recruited as a child soldier?
And you don't
right?
understand
like,
it, do you?
Yeah.
And if you've been around that and saw that, you think that's normal, for want of a better word. So to copy what you've seen other people do is not, especially as you're younger, that's what you do, isn't it? That's how you learn. You copy what someone else is doing and do it yourself. And and that can't be held against them in later life.
Atrocities happen, don't they? And it's finding out why they happened and trying to understand it. It's like when people go to jail, it's about reform and rehabilitation.
Well, it should be. I don't know whether it is.
Well, that's what it should be. But it's, you just throw away people and then release people.
We had John Reed on, didn't we? And he goes into prisons and he's explaining at the time. He said something to us on that podcast that if someone's in prison and comes out and lives next door to you, would you prefer them to have gone through a rehabilitation where they've learnt new skills and they've gone to a counsellor and they've gone through their issues, or would you prefer the way it is now where it's a bit of a free for all and then they're living next to you? And there's only one answer to that, isn't there? You want someone who's coming out and is coming out better than when they went in.
I mean, what's it like? That is like for because over here we've got the NHS, we've got rehabilitation, we've got rehab. Is there any help over there for these?
No, not at all. And I think like one thing that I see consistently in all the places that I work is that specifically mental health resources, non-existent. Like that is so low on the list of peace building and development priorities in post-conflict contexts, which of course, like there is a degree of realism that comes into play, right? Where like understanding that environments rebuilding themselves after war can't achieve everything all at once, that it is like progressive and that like inevitably choices and priorities have to be set. But it is interesting to see that mental health consistently and mental health resources consistently rank very, very low across the board, at least in my kind of anecdotal experience.
It's not really surprising because it's been so low in a developed country like the UK up until probably 10 years. You know, it's been on the, and it's still not at the same level as health, as physical health now.
Yeah.
So really, they're just following the course that we and technically we're more advanced. In,
Yeah.
You know,
Or should be.
it should be, yeah. But
But you'd say like with the mental health side, I mean, because I mean, just like with PTSD and CPTSD, the horrors that I must have seen, it must be tough for you and for the workers, for everyone, to carry them burdens.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly like has been challenging at times. Like if I speak for like myself and my own experiences, and I definitely as a researcher had to go through reaching my breaking point before I started paying attention and introducing, or at least trying to figure out what coping mechanisms could be and what my boundaries are and what an emphasis on dignity in research looks like when I also choose dignity for myself. But I'm sad to say that unfortunately I had to go through like falling apart before I took that seriously for myself. And that's such a shame, because I think that a lot of people do that. A lot of people have to, like, we're all reinventing that broken wheel in a sense, right? Where we have to break before we realize that, you know, like maybe we should be doing things differently. And life is massively different as a result in very positive ways for me. But I would like for other people not to have to first break in order to get stronger and to do things differently, because there are resources out there for us. Like they're not given to us on a platter, but you can do training. You can read about things like vicarious trauma is what we talk about a lot, right? Like the experience of being affected by doing research in difficult contexts about difficult subjects, and how you can manage that for yourself. Like there's psychological first aid training tools. Like there's actually a great course on Coursera that you can audit for free on psychological first aid that I like highly recommend to everybody who like engages with people who are like struggling or experiencing any kind of a trauma. Like it's a hugely helpful resource.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah. So do you know Coursera? The like it's an education platform, and a lot of the courses on there you have to pay for to take them. It got really big in the pandemic because everybody was like, "Oh, I'll just
take a
course."
course.
But some of the courses you can sign up and then you audit them, so you don't actually take like the exams that come with it. And you can do that for free. And there's one called Psychological First Aid. I think it's a professor from like Johns Hopkins who gives it. And it's really detailed and concrete and simple to understand, right? He talks about really like a lot of these things, Kev, are things that I see you do without even thinking about, right? Mm-hmm. It's as simple as active listening tools that include when somebody is telling you how they feel, that you mirror that back to them in terms of like you repeat what they say so that they know that they're heard, or how you validate somebody's like subjective lived experience of a thing without without diminishing what that was. You know, you will say things like this often, like, that must have been really hard, or like, that sounds like that was challenging, you know, little things that make people feel validated and safe in their experiences. And also the way that you often switch to focusing on positive things, right? Where you will say to people, and I've heard you do this, right? That you know, somebody will be sharing something difficult with you, and you will say at the end of that, like, oh, what are you doing for the rest of today? Or I'm watching a really funny show on Netflix right now. I highly recommend it, like introducing something positive into the situation. So you probably don't need the course then.
No, thank you. But I think if, like, that course then, if you could share that with me later, send it over to me. Because I can think of people, I think that'd be so brilliant for them to do for themselves. Because I think we live in the golden age of technology, don't we? Of, if you feel like this, there's a forum with someone like you in it. But there's so many of these courses, but they're not advertised enough.
No.
One of the reasons why we started this, because there's so much good people and good help out there, but people don't know where to find it. And I think a course like that would be so brilliant. I'd share that into my Lions family thing, saying, like, this might be good for you or someone you love. Work on yourself, make yourself the best you that you can be. And often that's harder than it, you know, if the resources are there, it's easy to do it.
Easier to do.
To do it, but you've got to have the courage to want to make yourself better. Focus on the antidote, not the poison.
Yeah.
How did you find out about that?
So this was actually homework for like a training that I went to do in the States last year. You remember I went to the States to do this course on research in conflict contexts, and it was like one of these heat courses as well, because you had like hostilities. Gosh, what does heat stand for? I've lost my mind now. But we had like these active simulations, like with gunfire, and like we had to learn CPR, and it was
Do you experience that when you're there in real life?
Not in the way that I did in the course.
Prepared you for the worst.
I'm very, very happy to report that. But we also had these classroom sessions on, like, you know, like interviewing techniques for working with vulnerable communities. But no, I have not been in a live gunfire situation. I thought I was once. Yeah, exactly. There was one, I will tell you a story about the one time in South Sudan that I did think I had been shot at. But
the car backfiring, really?
No, it's like there was something that like that like exploded the window in the car that I was in, but it ended up being like a small pebble that got caught in like a leaf blower and just like came with such high velocity that it shattered the window. But me and the driver, we were both like, "Oh my God, get down! It's happening!" And it was before I took the course, so I wouldn't have known.
It'd probably been worse after. Scared you even more.
But yeah, that's the closest I've been to a live gunfire. I've had some moments, but nothing quite that extreme.
Because with the conflicts going on in South Sudan, you can't go over there at the moment, can you?
Yes. So this is currently and has been for well over a year the biggest challenge in my research, but it has also created opportunity. So it's that duality. But yeah, so I have not been able to travel back to South Sudan for over a year, and my it's because the insurance department at my university will not provide coverage to go to like an FCDO red zone country, and South Sudan is a completely red zone country. And part of that comes from the fact that there is like an active and very severe civil war happening in Sudan, which still continues to have a lot of ties to South Sudan. And another part has to do with the fact that, of course, like while technically, like officially, there is not an active civil war in South Sudan, in reality, it is very much a country in conflict, and very much one where if you ask anybody in South Sudan or anybody like who identifies as South Sudanese, they will say, you know, like the country is at war, regardless of whatever status it has.
Because I know it's upset you've not been going, because obviously through your journey you have made ties and relationships, and you do care about the people.
Yeah.
Because you're not there just taking notes, and you've emotionally invested in their lives.
Yeah. No, absolutely. This is yeah, single-handedly the most challenging part of this restriction is, you know, I left South Sudan in 2022, having made a lot of connections, built a lot of relationships, and also having made a lot of promises about what, you know, when my return was going to be, what that would entail, like how I was going to share the findings from my research, what we could potentially do with that together. Because I think, you know, like ultimately, research is only, research is the most meaningful if it can have impact, and impact doesn't mean anything if it's not communicated or co-designed with the communities that you're working with themselves. And I haven't been able to go back, and I still, you know, get messages sometimes from my friends and my colleagues, asking when I'm coming back, and it breaks my heart to say, like, I have no idea. So that I, you know, I spent time there very much with the plan, the intention, and the commitment to building something bigger there, and investing in the research in that way. And to just have that like completely taken away has been really tough. It's been really frustrating. It's been a reason to think very hard about work and career and how I approach all of those things. But like I said, it's also provided an opportunity where, like, thinking about how I can continue doing the research in some kind of a way, knowing that I can't go back to South Sudan, created like the possibility to explore continuing the work in a different way in Kenya. And that has been my first experience working directly in like a refugee camp with displaced communities. And while that was confrontational, it was hugely rewarding. And then also beyond that, like, because I spent quite a bit of time in Nairobi as well, just for the first time in my career, doing research somewhere where I have so much freedom. Like I can move around completely freely. Like there's Uber, like everything works. Like I swear, like Nairobi is living in the future. And it was on a personal level also really meaningful, because I actually grew up in Kenya for 5 years when I was young, and this was my first time going back in like a very, very long time. So it was a very personally meaningful experience. But I was very cautious for the most part, like the 2/3 of the time that I was in Kenya, about not making promises that I knew I wasn't going to deliver on, because I wasn't supposed to be in Kenya, right? I was supposed to be in South Sudan. Like Kenya was my plan B. And so when I would meet people and they would ask like, oh, when are you coming back? You know, like what's next? Because people, like, you're grateful to make connections. But the truth is people also, like, they want to see you come back, right? Like they want this not to be like a one-off, like parachute in and then like leave research engagement or experience. And I was very careful about saying like, I can't make those promises. Like there is currently no plans to come back. Like this was like an emergency solution. And then I was asked by my work to go back, which was wonderful, because I like there's so much more that I want to do there. And I really, like, one of the things that attracts me to being a researcher so much is the ability to focus on depth instead of breadth. And the idea that I can continue to build what I have started there means so much. You know, I think we reach a point in life where like deeper, more meaningful experiences matter more than a little bit of everything, you know, and I'd rather focus more energy on what I've got and what I'm doing.
Have you been able to go back anywhere yet that you've done research for, and that research has changed the outcome for those people?
No, that's an excellent question, actually, Lee. And that's because my research has been academic in orientation. So my research hasn't changed anything for the people that I've worked with. It hasn't resulted in policy reform or impact. It has been an entirely academic enterprise. Like I've done some research consultancy work, which has been much more impact oriented, and I've gotten to see how that
The results of
yeah
doing it.
yeah like when I was living in Sierra Leone. But it is honestly like the biggest the biggest source of existential agony in my professional life is like how can I do the work that I love in ways that make that meaningful for the people that I'm working with. What can impact me? Like I think about impact all of the time and agonize over that.
I can imagine you do, because you're seeing the impact of what's already happened firsthand.
Yeah.
So,
and people, like, it happens so often, right? That people ask that question, right? Like, what will this mean for me? Like this generosity that I'm offering you by sharing like my lived experiences, by talking about the things that like have gone wrong, like the needs that I have, the gaps that there have been in peace building. Like, how will this improve my situation and when? And it's awful to have to sit there and say, like, I can't promise that. You know, maybe if the right people and organizations read my very academic outputs about this, maybe, but it's not guaranteed in the academic work that I do. And that's, you know, impact can mean lots of different things, right? Like fundamentally impact is the good that something does. Like I really like adhere to that very simple and like powerful like way of conceptualizing impact. But when you work with people who have had those experiences, you really want impact to be something that positively contributes to life for them. So
But sometimes just being heard is an impact, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm here and I can't talk about what I've been through. I can't. So just having someone to vent at and to get it off there, never got to carry that burden on their own. That's impacting its own way sometimes, isn't it?
And I think it's also just about understanding that like you also can't do everything, and that there's a part of you that will always wonder, even if your work has like tremendous impact, like how much impact is enough impact, right? And that it will always be something that you sit with. But I think that doesn't have to be a bad thing. I think being a little bit uncomfortable in that way probably also always pushes you to do the best that you can always. And then just this commitment to always trying to look for how I might do that differently. And that's something that's like very, very big for me right now. I've been talking to Kev about this a lot lately, how I'm trying to think of how I can do what I always do in different ways so that maybe the outcome or the outcomes can be different, right? Because I've very recently been very like wonderfully reminded that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome, right? So it's a good reminder to see what you can do differently.
And just having that research there, anyone can kind of pick that up and run with it. So it's kind of like the podcast. We can't change everyone's mindset, but what we can do is put ourselves out there for them to run with what they need from it. So if you haven't done that research, and definitely no one's going to pick that up. You know, no one's going to look.
Yeah.
So.
And that's what you're bringing out a book, aren't you? You're in the process of putting it out there.
I am. Thank you for like the plugging the book project, Kev. I am working on my first book at the moment. So this will be the translation of my PhD thesis into an actual physical book that you can hold and touch and buy when it's out.
But as Lee just said, and I'm going to come back to it, like, your book will be the research on these lives. And if it wasn't for the researchers, these lives are just forgotten. You know, and that's the sad thing about everything, isn't it? Without, you know, like, I've got a daughter and a wife, and you're taking photos all the time and you're sharing them. Some of these people, you know, they'll go through the saddest or the best or the most, whatever lives. And without people putting it down, they're just forgotten, aren't they? And what a sad state of affairs that is if all this war happens and all these lives are lost and all this pain, and it's just pushed under the carpet.
Yeah, no one learns anything from it, and you just go into the next.
Yeah, into the next war,
Yeah.
into the next war. And it's the people in the trenches, once again, those lovely people who just one day woke up and the world was different. We need to talk about what their life was before, what their life is during, and what they hope for their life will be tomorrow. And we can only do that by having the conversations, can't we?
And no, whether it's a book that's sad, happy, whatever it is, it will inspire other people to change.
That's very kind of both of you to say. Yeah.
We're plugging it, you know.
Yeah. Hopefully, I guess. Yeah. Once again, hope springs eternal. But yeah, that's a really nice perspective. So thank you.
And yeah, I can't wait to hear Sarah's book. I'm going to W.H. Smith trying to find it. This woman does not exist.
Yeah. We've been looking for a while.
So where are you next off on your voyages? Where are you off to?
So yeah, as you know, I do tend to stay on the move quite a lot. And the next journey for me is to the Philippines to go and see my father who lives in the Philippines and has for many years. And the Philippines is another country that I grew up in as a child. So I've lived in several places.
Can I just on that, how you've lived in so many places?
Yeah.
How does that come about?
So growing up, it was as a result of my father's work, like my father is in the exciting and nomadic world of IT.
I thought you was going to say he was in the army or something that travel IT.
Yeah, he works in IT, but he built his career in agricultural development organizations, and it's like a cult. Once you're in one, you just kind of hop from one to another in different places around the world. So that's what he did, and he was very happy in that space. So my parents lived first in Mexico, which is where my brother and I were born. And there he was working in an organization focused on corn. And then we moved to the Philippines. And there he was working at an organization focused on rice, which is also where he then returned to because he's now back there. And then we moved to Kenya, and there it was agroforestry, I think. And then from Kenya, we landed in the Netherlands for a while, and then my mother stayed in the Netherlands. My father then continued his travels. My dad spent some time in Bosnia, in Kosovo, and then ultimately returned to the Philippines, where he's very, very happy. My dad is a white guy, by the way. In case you're wondering, he's like 2 meters tall, white Dutch guy. And he loves it there. So he retired last year and has no plans to leave. So he's living his best life. But it's been really special for me ever since he went back to the Philippines, because it's a place that I grew up in, and it has offered me the chance to return and revisit some childhood spaces and memories that, for somebody like me, like, you don't expect that opportunity to come back around. So I'm going to go see him in a couple of weeks, and I will get to see the playground where, like, I learned to climb on, like, the monkey bars, where I fell down and, like, split my lip open. which is wonderful. So that was growing up.
Well, it certainly doesn't sound boring. It sounds like you experienced a lot before adulthood.
Yeah, and I think it really defined for me, like my relationship with the world, right? That like the world in its bigness is still very small, and I think that's where my interest in like social justice issues also came from. Like I always knew that I wanted to work in an international way. Like I wanted to be able to travel and work internationally, and I knew that I wanted to work on social justice issues. So as an adult, I've lived then in the Netherlands, in Sweden, Scotland, Sierra Leone, back to the Netherlands, and now here.
Is that so? You call this home here now? Because you seem like
it's where I live.
Yeah.
Because I mean, English isn't even your first language, is it?
That's true. It's my best language, but it's not my first language. English is my third language technically. So my first language was Spanish, which is not my best language now. Spanish and then Dutch, and then English. In fact, when we moved to the Philippines, I didn't speak any English. I only spoke Spanish and Dutch. And my mom tells me this story that I don't myself remember, but of how she'd have to go with me to the playground because I couldn't play with any of the other kids because there was like, for some reason at the time, there were no other Dutch and Spanish speaking kids in our compound. And there was this little girl, she's a year older than me. And she grew up to be like a really amazing person. She was playing on the playground and tried to have a conversation with me in English. And my mom had to say to her, like, I'm sorry, but she doesn't speak any English yet. And she said to my mom, that's okay, I'll wait.
Oh.
And she did, yeah.
Oh, what a wonderful thing to say. Only a child could say something that beautiful.
Right. Yeah.
And but do you think that's where like the war and conflict just sometimes feeling different and feeling, well, it's not nice to feel different. How can I put this right?
Maybe. I don't. That's an interesting way to look at it. I do think that like so much of conflict is a result of how we weaponize our differences. And of course, I think, like being very nomadic and like juggling multiple, I was going to say personalities, but that is not what I meant. Identities and dimensions of identity can make it challenging to feel like at ease. But I couldn't, in all honesty, say that feeling different has really ever made me feel less than. But I think it's a very interesting point that you make, that just being aware of that and living life through difference could very well subconsciously have influenced some of my choices. The truth is, I'm really not a researcher that's interested in war. I'm only ever interested in conflict because of what it tells us about the conditions needed for peace. I'm really all about hope and dignity and peace building. And then it requires attending to dimensions of war in order to understand.
So I've heard you say the word dignity a few times in this episode, and it's something that we all like to have, isn't it? Dignity, and you feel like your grandparents when they're getting old and poorly, and they all say, I want to hold on to my dignity. And it's such a luxury. It's not something that's guaranteed, isn't it? And if you can maintain dignity, it's such a blessing, isn't it? And some of these people must have so little of it and must cling on to it so dearly.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Dignity is a thing that we are all intrinsically entitled to, right? Like nobody has to earn a life in dignity. Like it is something that by virtue of existing, we are worthy of having. but it is equally something that we experience and exercise through our relationships with each other and with the world, right? There's this wonderful like Zulu concept of Ubuntu, and I'm really borrowing this from my very good friend David Mombari, who I have to plug when saying this because like I need to give him all the credit because he reflects on this a lot. And it Ubuntu means I am because you are. And that's so much of what dignity is, right? You know, like, you know that you are deserving of being, like, you are deserving of worth and value and humanity. But you only really feel that when people treat you in that way, right? When you feel also, I think of what you're talking about, just, you know, your quality of life is at a certain standard, is part of what it means to live in dignity as well. To be able to die in dignity is also important, you know, like, because that is also something that isn't guaranteed. You know, I come from a country where, like, we have health care options and resources that provide opportunities to also give people that choice. And yeah, so dignity it's a lot of things. And I think about that a lot in research, you know, especially being a peace and conflict researcher, where I struggle and agonize over, like, how can I centralize and embed impact in my work, and how can I also contend with the reality that to some degree all research is a form of extraction, right? It is I can only do the work that I do when people are generous enough to share their stories with me, and that is an act of harvesting, right? Like, and at its worst, that can be an act of exploitation, but, like, it doesn't have to be. And I think that doing that and approaching that process with a commitment to dignity and figuring out what that is so important.
As you say, you are extracting, like, all knowledge is extracted, isn't it,
Yeah.
from somewhere. But you're not stealing it, you're not fabricating it. And I think as long as you're honest with it,
Yeah.
and people are consenting to it, once again, so they're not forgotten. So hopefully we can learn by the mistakes of our past and we don't repeat it in the future.
Mhm.
And that's what it's all about, isn't it?
Yeah. Hopefully, that's kind of you to say.
So where do you, after this book is obviously the bestseller, quite obvious, totes obs.
As the cool kids would
That's
say.
the cool term, you know. I was at a 9-year-old birthday party yesterday. I'm down with the lingo.
I see that.
Totes obs, you know. But
everybody will be getting a copy of that book the first, you know, whatever Christmas that year that it comes out. That will be my present to everyone.
But after you've made this bestseller,
Mhm.
where do you see yourself? Where do you see yourself being?
Yeah.
5 years, 10 years, wherever, next year?
Oh, that is the hardest question you could ask.
Retired
me
off the
right now.
proceeds from the book.
Yeah, that's
Exactly.
Big yacht.
Living the life. Yeah. Living on my private island. You know, no people, just me and a bunch of puppies. You can come by every once in a while.
Oh, thank you.
Jury's still out on you. I don't know is the most honest answer that I can give right now. I don't see myself staying in the UK. So I would go so far as to say probably not here. But where I do land next and what I do wherever that is very much a question mark for me right now.
Does that excite you or terrify you?
Both. Both. It is I don't know, if terrifyingly excited, excitedly terrifying. It's both. I am somebody who is very goal oriented. I'm very big on discipline and planning, but I'm also equally, like, quite committed to remaining curious and open-minded. And that is a paradox that I'm trying to manage. I don't know. I'm thinking about that a lot, and I'm taking some steps to try and explore options for myself. So I can't give more of an answer. Invite me back on the podcast in a year, and we can touch base on where I am then.
I just remember everything has gone be forever.
That's true.
Try it, enjoy it, or don't like it. But at least then you know you didn't like it.
Yeah. No, that's very true. I think the the advantage of having lived a fairly mobile life up until now is that the idea of another place, another chapter, another adventure it doesn't feel very alien, right? Like I've gone through the motions before. I know I'll be fine. Also, though, I would really like for whatever and wherever comes next to be a place where I can be comfortable enough to hang up some art on my walls. I am longing for those things as well.
The simple things.
Yeah, right. That maybe I can start buying physical hard copy books again instead of reading everything on my Kindle, because books just weigh you down, literally.
But tomorrow will be here soon enough.
And I will be here tomorrow.
So on this lovely note, give us a quote.
Okay. So I did, as I said, I saved a bunch on my phone, and I've managed to throw a few, I've peppered the podcast with a few of them. I've decided I'm going to share my absolute favorite proverb with you. So I'm going to gift you with that one. And it requires a little bit of a story, right? So have you heard of the saying, curiosity killed the cat?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you hear that saying, how would you use that? What does that mean to you?
I don't know. Stop being nosy.
Stop being nosy, right? It's a caution. It's cautioning people, right? Don't take risks. Stay in your lane. When in reality, that's actually only half of that saying. We just don't use the other half, and as a result, we misunderstand it completely. The full proverb goes, curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought it back. It is actually encouraging us to be and stay curious.
Say it one more time for me.
So it goes, curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought it back.
Very lovely.
It's my absolute favorite.
Well, thank you ever so much for coming on. And once again, wherever the world may take you, the beauty is now you haven't got to be around here. We can Skype in a year's time, and we'll get you back on. And I'm sure whatever you do.
Skype, Kev.
No, you do not.
Does anyone Skype now?
Oh, yeah. Whatever you call it.
You're up with the kids 2 minutes ago. You're down
with
now.
FaceTime.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's really been my pleasure and honor.
And I guarantee you, whatever you do in a year's time, you'll be smashing it.
Thank you.
So, guys, I hope you've all enjoyed that. I want you all to take care of yourselves and each other. Ta-ra a bit.
Listen.
And that's a wrap for another show. But if there are any comments or messages that you would like us to read out for our next podcast, please be in touch. There are also lots of different organisations at the bottom of this page, and hopefully they can help you or someone you care about. Please share this to spread the word. Until we talk next time, ta-ra a bit.
Listen.